Attention, attention, all personnel. Incoming podcast. This is MASH Matters.
It's MASH Matters, the podcast celebrating MASH and all things that matters to MASH. That's poor grammar. I know that right off the bat.
I think it is. We're in a lot of trouble now. You've just taken us down.
My English teacher wife has already cringed. She's already turned this episode off, I guarantee.
You may have to sit in the principal's office for about a half an hour or longer.
I'm going to get a detention.
Yeah.
I'm Ryan Patrick, and this is Jeff Maxwell. Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Ryan Patrick. This is Jeff Maxwell. Still? Still is, yeah. About 6 feet tall. Incredibly handsome. Charming as all get out.
Thank you. And Bachelor number 2.
Yeah.
This is MASH Matters, but today it's MASH Mouth Matters because we are welcoming not one, but 2 guests to the podcast. We would like to welcome our friends from the MASH Mouth podcast, Vanessa Cameron and Ethan Tucker. Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Good. Thank you for joining us today. We're kind of family.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we're podcast cousins. We're all part of this same family doing these podcasts about this show that we love.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a very important question to ask before we begin.
Okay.
Now, it is Vanessa and Ethan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So there's 2 of you. Wouldn't that make it MASH Mouths?
Oh, perhaps.
I mean,
right.
has that ever come up
Right.
before?
No, we've never thought about that before.
Well,
Wow.
all right. I'm just throwing it out there.
Like the podcast is like one mouth collectively, I guess. I don't know.
You could say that. Yes, I suppose you could say that. But it makes me uncomfortable to not say MASH Mouths. Well, no, it actually is harder to say, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a little hard
Yeah,
to say.
MASH Mouths. No, we don't want to do that. Just, you're fine. MASH Mouth.
If
Thank
my
you.
wife did turn it back on, she's now turned it off for sure. because
Oh, for sure.
We're just butchering the English language today. Vanessa and Ethan, tell us about MASH Mouth.
So it's a podcast that Vanessa and I do where we talk about MASH because Vanessa is a huge MASH fan. She is lifelong, and it's just something that we started to do kind of as a hobby because it was a thing where it's like we were kind of going to talk about the show anyway because I was watching it at the time. It's like, this should be a podcast. Sorry, I'm extremely nervous.
Oh, Ethan, don't be nervous. No.
Don't be nervous.
I think you ought to drink a bunch of gin. That's what I do when I get nervous.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, Ethan, go into the other room, get a drink. It'll be fine.
Strip down if you haven't already.
Right.
Get the gin.
It's the only way to podcast.
Like Ethan was saying, we knew we were going to talk about it anyway. I have been intimately familiar with the show before, but Ethan had kind of come onto it on his own and then asked me one day, like, hey, have you heard of this show MASH? And I'm like, oh, have I heard of MASH? Really? So we knew that we were going to be discussing and talking about the episodes kind of anyway. So we just wanted to document it more for ourselves than anything else. And we said, well, why don't we just start a podcast about it?
Yeah, it was one of those things where I was texting her about the episodes I was watching, and she, had amazing clarity of memory for, what episodes were what, and it just kind of became a thing of, hey, instead of, texting every single time that I watch an episode, let's just have this conversation on mic so we can just, have this for a thing for ourselves.
Yeah.
How fun. Yeah, that's great.
So, Ethan, are you still working your way through the series, or have you watched the entire series and now you're just going back and talking about the episodes?
No, I've actually only seen up to the episode that we have published now.
Really?
Because when we decided to do this, I was like, it would be better if I was going in blind for a lot of the stuff. When I was watching the show originally, I watched up to Abyssinia Henry, and I had no idea. I had no context for what happens in an episode, and it legitimately broke my heart as if I was watching it when it first aired. I was like, how dare they choose to do this to Henry?
Yeah.
Did you retroactively write a letter to Larry Gelbart and Gene Reynolds? Half of America did when that episode aired.
I was very tempted. If there was someone to contact, I would have contacted them because I couldn't watch the show for a few months because I would be too sad to watch whatever comes after Henry. And thankfully, I do enjoy Colonel Potter and the shenanigans that they've gotten up to afterwards, but it genuinely hurt me in a way that I was not expecting to see Henry like very suddenly pass away. It was like, oh God.
Wow, yeah.
Well, you and McLean Stevenson have the same reaction, I think.
Yeah.
Gee. Well, that was a very dramatic thing for a television show to do. I mean, to kill off one of the beloved characters was a very shocking and very progressive thing to do for a TV series. Gosh.
Absolutely.
That was a stunner.
Yeah, and I think that what kind of started us wanting to do the podcast in general was Ethan's reaction to that scene, because I was like, how great would it have been if you had come to that episode naturally and we had just talked about it naturally.
Yeah.
So that's why Ethan hasn't watched most of the series. He stopped right after that because I was like, I need your genuine reaction to the rest of the series, please.
I'm not like totally blind. Like I have a vague idea of like the different plot points that they're going to hit. I know that like Frank leaves the show at some point. I know Radar leaves, but I don't know how or like under what circumstance. I guess that's the same thing. But I assume there's not multiple hardcore tragic deaths going on. Like I assume Frank leaving is not going to be ultra dramatic. He's just going to be like, okay, I guess I'm going home. See you guys.
So there's my question. There's still a lot of MASH that you have not seen. How are you able to avoid 40-year-old spoilers from one of the most beloved shows of all time?
It's not as hard as you would think. Like, it really depends on where you go. Because MASH spoilers, because it is so ingrained in pop culture, can pop up anywhere. Like, you watch, like, Jeopardy, there will be questions about, like, the MASH finale and everything. Or, like, randomly in an episode of Family Guy, they'll be like, oh, by the way, we're just doing a MASH parody now. It's like, okay. But, like, if you're just kind of living your life and not on the MASH side of the internet, as we've learned exists doing this podcast, you can kind of steer clear of a lot of the major events of the show.
Vanessa, you have, we talk about Ryan was a major fan of the show, and I worked there and kind of never watched the thing. I heard about it, but I didn't pay much attention to it. And you're a major fan of the show. I have two questions for you. One is, when did that start? How did that happen? And two, does that create any difference between you and Ethan in terms of how you feel about it and how you feel the show develops and what happens in every episode?
So the first part of your question, I came into MASH when I was about 11 or 12, I think. And I think that most people, they watch it because their parents have watched it, or at least people who have come into the show in reruns watch it because their parents watched the reruns. That wasn't my experience. I actually watched it on my own after another show that I was watching. It was just on, and I was like, this is pretty funny. At 11 or 12, I assumed that most of the jokes kind of went over my head, but I just kind of kept watching it at that point. And then I would watch it with my parents because they're like, oh, I remember this show. That's so funny that you're into it now. So that's kind of how I came into MASH. And well, I think that for me, MASH was pretty formative because it launched me into wanting to watch a lot of older TV, a lot of older media. So that shaped my whole teenage experience, kind of. But in terms of how we see it, how Ethan and I see it differently, I don't think it's changed much because I'm watching it now as an adult. So I, of course, have a different understanding and appreciation for the show. So I think we mostly see eye to eye on things like what works in the show and what doesn't, and how we feel about certain episodes and this, that, and the other thing. So I don't think, because I watched it so young the first time, I don't think that it stops us from seeing it the same way.
And Ethan, do you disagree with everything she just said?
Oh, 100%, of course. We're about to have a major argument here. No, I think that Vanessa and I are like pretty in sync of how we feel about media on most days. There are some episodes that like I like more than she does, and there are episodes that she dislikes more than I do. But generally, we're able to articulate our feelings in a similar way and kind of come to a consensus. There's like different things that we appreciate, but it's just like a well-constructed show, and there's like a lot to talk about. There's like more to talk about than doing like any other sitcom for like a podcast. So it's just like we're able to have a pretty good conversation around it.
When you say there's more to talk about than other sitcoms, I'd like to hear from both of you. What do you think the more is? What is it that MASH presents and offers that the My Mother the Card didn't?
So for me, I don't want to scoop you, Ethan, but
yeah, go ahead.
For me, I think that what I love about MASH so much, and probably what kind of drew me to MASH in the first place, even as a younger kid, was that it is so timeless. I mean, I really love history. I have a degree in history, but I think that there are a lot of parallels to the modern world that we fortunately, unfortunately still see from the 1950s to the 1970s to, the 2000s. So that's kind of what we talk about the most, is what strikes us as still modern. And then, things that may not hold up as well.
Yes, they don't age well. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. So I do think that the fact that you can still connect a lot of the things from MASH to the modern world, like war, bureaucracy, government, treatment of women, stuff like that. So that's why I like to talk about MASH, and that's what I think that we mostly talk about.
Yeah. With MASH, there's such a strong emotional core and such a strong dramatic core to a lot of the episodes. Like, they're dealing with heavier subject matter than, like, I feel like a lot of sitcoms tend to deal with on a regular basis. Like, if we were doing a podcast about Seinfeld or Friends, there isn't a lot to say beyond it's funny. But, in like episodes like Sometimes You Hear the Bullet or like Aid Station, you'd be like, okay, how are they handling this topic that they are covering? Are they doing it well? How's the drama here? I think that's what makes it very interesting as a podcast. And even as the filmmaking goes, like, I feel like it's very well written. Like, dialogue is so snappy, and the camera work is something to appreciate, because there's like a lot of interesting angles in a lot of the episodes that like you don't see a lot in other sitcoms, especially older ones.
Yeah. And talking to you both, and I think we actually started to talk about that before we started recording, but I found it interesting that you both may have different approaches to how you broadcast and how you live and how you relate to broadcasting your podcast. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So more of like our process, kind of, if that's what you're asking.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, much more eloquent question. Okay. What's your process, both of you?
Sure. So at least for me, I know that our processes are very different. I watch the episode. Sometimes I watch it twice, but I take really scrupulous notes on the episodes, what I like, what I dislike, what I think that the writers were intending to say, what they might have been kind of hinting at or whatnot in the episode. And I write it all down in pages and pages of notes to kind of refer back to. And I won't spoil what Ethan does, but it's not that for sure.
Okay, Ethan, what's yours?
I just write down the lines that I like, and then I go from there. I think it speaks to our different backgrounds, I guess. I kind of come from like a sort of filmmaking background. Like, that's kind of what I did through high school and like early college. I wanted to be a filmmaker. So I guess that I more naturally am able to say what I want to say about a TV show or a movie than Vanessa is, where she has to like really think about it, where I'm like, okay, I can kind of articulate what I want to say relatively quickly. And Vanessa's like, I need to hunker down and like write out all of my thoughts to make this coherent.
And I think that comes from my background as well, because I'm from like an academic background and I did a lot of research and stuff like that. So I feel like my notes and stuff are the only way that I can get thoughts out in a semi-coherent manner.
Right.
We bounce off each other well.
I'm starting to see in our universe, I'm Vanessa and Jeff is Ethan.
Yeah.
It seems like there might be similarities there.
Yes.
That is so funny.
Every podcast needs someone who over-prepares and someone who's just like, I'm here for the commentary.
Yeah. I'm here for refreshments. Yes.
Yeah. Here for the hot dogs. Yeah.
So I'm envious, Ethan, that you are watching the show with a fresh eye. Is there anything that has, this is really a question for both of you. Ethan, is there anything so far with MASH that has surprised you? And similar question for you, Vanessa. You're already a fan. You had already watched the show. You know the show. But now that you're watching it with a critical eye, is there anything that's standing out to you? Whoever would like to answer first, I'll let you flip a coin.
Okay.
Ethan, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I win the coin toss here.
Okay.
There is a lot that surprised me. I think just the way it's written, how like fast the characters speak is something that like really surprised me when I started watching it. Something that I like really connected to was like, oh, they're speaking in this very kind of not modern way, but this like very interesting way to see for like a sitcom to do. And one episode that we covered somewhat recently where I was like, oh, I didn't know that they could do this kind of concept in the 70s when the show was on, was the episode called Hawkeye, where it's just Hawkeye in a house kind of giving a monologue to himself.
Yeah.
I've since learned that apparently that's not a fan favorite episode. Like, it is somewhat contested. Like, we've gotten a few comments about that. But I really love that episode because, like, wow, this is so unique and so interesting. Like, that's such a cool concept to do, especially so many years ago, where it's like, hey, we have this very good idea. We're going to let Alan Alda give a one-man show performance.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. The more concept-driven, more interesting episodes of MASH are really what surprised me because I'm always so impressed that they thought to do that at the time that it was produced.
Oh boy, do you have some good surprises coming your way.
Yeah.
Oh
Does
boy.
Does he ever?
Mercy.
If there's any comfort to it, I agree with Ethan. I love that episode as well. I happened to be there when he was doing that, and I watched it, and I thought, wow, this is really good. Mm-hmm. This is really good. And I know it's not a fan favorite.
It's just hard to write and perform such a long monologue like that. I was so impressed by it.
Boy.
Yeah, even though he had co-stars in the episode, they didn't speak English.
Yeah.
It was all him. And yes, you're right. It is a divisive episode. People come down hard on either side. They either love it or they hate it. There's not much of a middle ground. There are a handful of other episodes in your future that are similar.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to them.
So, Vanessa, what has surprised you?
I think that what's most surprising to me, and this kind of came from, again, when I was doing more research about the show as an adult, because I had scoured the internet for like MASH facts when I was a little kid. But I think that what was most surprising to me was just like how progressive the show was. I kind of took for granted just how revolutionary the show of MASH was, especially in the earlier seasons. Mm-hmm. For me, when I went and I watched quote unquote older sitcoms like in the 90s and whatnot, you could see almost the parallels of what they were doing and what they were kind of allowed to do because of MASH. And that is just something, again, as an adult, I am able to put those pieces together a little bit more.
So MASH was a trailblazer.
Yes.
In a way.
Yes.
Okay.
In a way, sure.
Well, it certainly was. I mean, it hired a really, really wonderful actor, Jeff Maxwell, and that's got to be trailblazing right there.
Of course.
Perhaps the best choice they ever made.
To let him on the soundstage as much as they did. It was an amazing thing that they did.
And it's so funny, too, for me with the character of Igor. I remember watching with my parents, and my mother's grandfather was a cook in the Navy. So she would always say to me, that's the most important job because nobody can do anything if they're not fed. And I'm sitting there watching it like, oh boy, but they hate him. So did they hate my great grandfather too? I was so concerned.
I don't think they hated Igor. I think they hated the food, basically.
Yes.
And he was the only thing that they could scream at.
Yeah, they hated what Igor represented.
Yes.
Liver or fish.
Yeah.
Yes. That was a great episode, by the way. I really enjoyed that one. That one was hyped up by like all the internet stuff that I saw, and it lived up to the hype. I was like, this is why everybody talks about Adam's rib as an episode.
And just so you know, I mean, when I asked Alan, hey, when that happened, how did you do that? Because that wasn't rehearsed when he jumps up on the table and does all that
wasn't?
stuff.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't. He may have said, hey, I might do something, and the camera may have been ready, but it wasn't a rehearsed situation. And so when he did that, my mouth dropped open, and I was as stunned as the photograph of me banging those things. When I was doing it. An amazing thing he did. He says it just felt right.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it worked for the shot too. That was fantastic. Very iconic.
Yeah.
So, Ethan, so far, are there any characters or episodes that really stand out for you? I'm going to ask the same to you, Vanessa, but you have the luxury of knowing what's coming.
I do.
Yeah. So far, and I know this is basic, but my favorite character is Hawkeye. I think he's such an interesting anchor point for the show. Mm-hmm. I love that he hates it there, but he's so good at his job, and he's kind of a showman. It's not just a character being funny. It's like a character trying to be funny because he has to be, because that's the only way he can cope. I think that's very interesting. And in terms of favorite episodes, I think it was called The Late Captain Pierce, where Hawkeye is falsely believed to be dead, and he's trying to communicate to his father that he's actually alive. That episode hit the right buttons for me of being drama and comedy. It was a great kind of, again, emotional core of the episode that I just really appreciated. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there are a lot of episodes that I've liked a lot more as we've gone on and talked about them. And I know Vanessa has a mountain of episodes that she adores.
Well, okay, Vanessa, give us some of yours.
Okay, so a lot of these episodes we actually haven't covered just yet. So I can't really say much about why I love them because I don't want to spoil it for Ethan.
I understand.
But one of my all-time favorite episodes, which I actually came to find out that a lot of people don't like, is Cave, I think in season 7. I don't know what keeps bringing me back to that episode, but I just watched it recently again because it was just on TV. And I was like, man, I love this episode. And it stood out to me even when I was a kid. Other ones, pretty basic. The Nurses, because I love Margaret's character development.
Right.
And also Where There's a Will, There's a War. That is one of my all-time favorites.
That's a great one. Yeah. What are you, again, no spoilers, but is there anything, Vanessa, that you're excited about that Ethan doesn't know about yet? You know what I mean? Ooh. Just in general.
Oh, mole. Ow.
Yeah. Ethan, don't listen. Plug your ears.
Well, this isn't really a spoiler because Ethan and I do talk about MASH even off mic. So
we are fans.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. We're not just doing this because we love podcasting. It's because we're fans.
You're not just doing it for the money, right? Yeah.
Only
the money. So I think that I'm really excited for him to see the development of Margaret's character because as I've said multiple times, Margaret becomes such a great character. I mean, she's a great character throughout the entire show, but she kind of comes into her own in that episode, The Nurses, and even before that. And we've kind of discussed it a little bit on Mash Mouth. And then also I want to know what his feelings are about the last episode. I want to know if he's going to like it because I know that some people don't. And oh man, I'm so excited to hear what he has to say about it.
I got a while to go for that.
You do?
Yes.
But I know you were excited, Vanessa, for me to meet BJ and Colonel Potter. And I do have to say that I like those characters a lot more than I was anticipating following Henry's death. That's really what put me off watching it for a long time. I was just not prepared to kind of see the transition. But now that we are past that transition, I do find BJ to be a very interesting character. I like that he's such a nice guy, and it's such a good contrast compared to where Trapper was, where Trapper was the same guy as Hawkeye a little bit. We do have more of that kind of interesting dynamic between him and BJ now. And, Colonel Potter's just King Grandpa. I love him.
And you haven't met Charles yet.
I haven't.
Oh, I'm so excited.
And I know that's your favorite character. And I'm looking forward to seeing him.
I find it interesting that you're really relating the show on their podcast as you're seeing it. It's in real time, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, we always say as God intended. We're watching it, or at least Ethan's watching it as God intended.
Yeah, I guess I am. We've actually gotten comments about that. We've gotten a few fan emails and some Instagram private messages. And the messages that stuck out to us as, ooh, this is really exciting, is that people are generally very happy to find a podcast about MASH that has someone not super familiar with the show and also like a woman talking about it, because apparently that's just not very common. So we've accidentally fallen into like a pretty clear niche for ourselves that people seem to enjoy.
Yeah, for the most part, most of the MASH podcasts have been focused from the male perspective. It's refreshing to be able to hear, and also younger voices.
Yeah,
we're a bunch of old guys here talking about this show, and to hear the perspective of younger people who are seeing it for the first time, or you're seeing it for the 17th time, but you're seeing it through different eyes because you watched it when you were a kid and now you're watching it as an adult and you're seeing new things. And it's like peeling back layers from an onion. You're seeing these new things. Every time I watch it, I see something new. Sometimes I'll watch an episode that I've seen a zillion times, but I will purposefully watch a character in that scene who I've never really watched before, whether it's somebody just in the background, like a background actor, or if it's one of the principal cast. I will just focus on them for the entire scene and watch their choices. And I've caught things that I never caught before, so it makes it fresh every time I get to watch it. And that's fun. That's fun.
Yeah, that's why I have a lot of fun doing the podcast as well, doing MASH Mouth, because like I've seen the episodes so many times, and I do the same thing where something always stands out to me that's different from when I either watched it in reruns just recently or watched it as a kid. So that's another reason that I just love talking about MASH. And I love to credit the writers and the cast and everybody, because you don't get that all the time with a lot of sitcoms, but with this one, you really do.
How do you watch the show? Do you watch it on Hulu? Do you watch it on DVD? How do you watch it?
So I have DVDs, but I no longer have a DVD player, I don't think. I watch it on Hulu.
Yeah. We both watch it on Hulu. I have the DVD set, and for certain episodes, I've opted to watch it on DVD without the laugh track, just to get that different experience, especially for the more dramatic episodes. And it is funny how much the show actually does change without a laugh track.
Yeah.
But generally, we watch it on Hulu, just because it's like the easy option, you don't have to like load in a disc every time. But I do kind of wish that I watched the entire show without the laugh track, because it's such an interesting, different universe, honestly.
Well, laugh track's from a different era, too. You still have some shows that are filmed in front of a studio audience, but there was no studio audience. Where's the audience? Who are these weird people laughing in the middle of Korea? Vanessa, what's your opinion on the laugh track?
So that's really funny, because Ethan and I talk about this all the time. And I really do think that my formative years were so MASH focused. So I don't like to watch shows that don't have a canned laughter. I just don't like it. It's part of what's funny for me. So I really don't like to watch sitcoms that don't have fake studio laughter. So I think it's great, personally. Ethan might have a different feeling about it, but I love it.
It's comfortable to you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Vanessa, I have to agree a little bit.
Oh, yes.
I'm not in love with the laugh track, but I don't hate it like most people hate it. And I, like you, I grew up with all of those sitcoms with a laugh track. And so without it, it sounds wrong. Something is off.
Right,
I
exactly.
The rhythm isn't there. I'm not being let in on the rhythm of the dialogue and what the writers wanted me to feel. So those laugh tracks for me, and the word comfort is a great word, because it does give me a little comfort to hear that. But I understand, I certainly understand the reasoning behind not listening to people go,
right.
The guy drops the scalpel in the guy's appendix.
Well, one of the smartest things they ever did was not allow the laugh track to happen when they were in the OR. You can't have somebody bleeding out with a laugh track.
Well, although real surgeons do that, so they'll
right. I feel like laugh tracks work better when it's with a live studio audience.
Yes. Yeah, it definitely does.
Post-production, you're like, all right, we don't need it's like watching old Scooby-Doo and it has a laugh track. Like, we don't need that here.
I could take or leave the laugh track. There are many times I love to watch it without the laugh track. There are some times where the laughs were put in way too often for no reason whatsoever, other than to
remind you it's a sitcom.
To remind you, hey, it's supposed to be a comedy. Exactly. Yeah. And
right.
I don't need that. But, I do understand your point, Vanessa, of, that's how we grew up watching it. And so that is how it's most comfortable to us. And so that does make a lot of sense. So where did the name Mash Mouth come from?
Oh, this is so funny. So we were talking about in I think early 2021. We were talking about, right, Ethan? 2021?
Something like that. It was a slow process to get here.
I believe early 2021 we were talking about starting our podcast, and we were like, oh, what should we call it? How should we like say MASH in the title, whatever. So I said to my mom, who knew I was a huge MASH fan, and I said, what do you think we should title this podcast? Without missing a beat, my mom says, Mash Mouth. And that's how it happened.
Wow.
Good title. Because you're like, wow, that works. We're talking with our mouths about MASH. It works. And we get to ride on the Smash Mouth coattails a little bit for people who misspell it. It's a delight.
And your network is called Valiantly Off Balance. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's our website, which we kind of just dove into because it was like really cheap to make an LLC. So we're like, oh, we should just do that. And Vanessa's favorite word is valiantly, apparently. And I just can never walk in a straight line without feeling I'm going to fall over. So it like came together really well.
Ethan, you said your favorite character was Hawkeye. Mm-hmm. Be very careful with this answer. Who's your second favorite character?
I have to go with that charming cook. I mean, homie serves liver every day, but like, come on, he does it pretty well.
I'm stunned. Well, how nice. Thank you so much. That's wonderful to hear. And of course, Vanessa, what would you say?
I think that it's very hard for me to pick a favorite. It's literally like picking a favorite child, I guess, which sounds so silly. But I of course love Margaret. I think that Margaret's character goes through such a great arc in the show. So she's definitely my favorite. Close second has got to be BJ, because he's just great. I think that BJ and I have a very similar sense of humor, and it's probably because I grew up watching him.
Okay, so the third favorite character, Vanessa. Be very careful about this.
Above all else, Igor, because it's like he's part of my family.
Oh, how sweet. Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much. That's wonderful. I share your belief there. Of course, he's my first favorite character. Yeah, it's funny because all the episodes, people ask me, what's your favorite episode? And I feel like they're all part of my family. I was there for a long time. And so it's hard for me to say, oh, well, this one's better and this one I like because I guess I could boil it down and say, well, because I was in it, I like it better. But it's hard to pick and choose because they all had so many interesting beats and things in them individually. Even if the whole episode wasn't terrific, there was all moments in each of them that were wonderful.
Right, exactly. I think that what we talk about on Mash Mouth all the time is that even if an episode was kind of like a flop for us, it usually isn't. The episode entirely isn't a flop. There's always something that we can find redeemable from the episode.
Yeah, except for like really, really bad and weird ones that like the cast even like dislikes, like that episode where Frank finds gold or something.
Yes,
that was like, okay, we're not feeling this one, and apparently no one else feels this one either.
Yeah, we did an entire episode on least favorite episodes, and that was one of the ones. Yeah, Major Fred C. Dobbs.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's one of my least favorites as well. Okay, but where do you fall on the big red bird with fuzzy pink feet?
That's our favorite guy.
I think that we both really liked it.
Okay, all right. Well, see, we're just going to have to agree to disagree on that.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Well, we can cut out most of Vanessa, right?
Right? Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes. So what's on the horizon for you guys? What's next?
I think we're just trucking along with Mash Mouth after Vanessa's ready to jump back on the recording horse. And after that, who knows? We have a lot more show to do, and we're very excited for that. And of course, we have our own personal projects, like Vanessa's trying to be a lawyer and I'm trying to draw comic books. Very, very big dichotomy between those two, but hey.
Trying to be a lawyer is the very key phrase there.
Trying. It is trying at times, isn't it?
Yes. Oh boy. But at least for me, I know that Ethan and I have talked about continuing our creative endeavors together. So we, a lot of the time, when I eventually have time again, hopefully sometime soon, we do want to kind of do another deep dive, maybe not a podcast, but maybe some kind of video or whatnot about other older sitcoms and kind of what that says about the time period. And so that might be on the horizon.
Are there other shows, like outside of MASH, what else do you like to watch?
Vanessa's been itching to talk about All in the Family. Like that is all she wants to do. She wants to deep dive into that thing.
Wow.
Yeah. And for me, I watch a variety of things. I kind of have no one specific thing that I watch. I kind of watch literally everything. I'm watching Succession right now. Having a fun time with that.
Yes, I've watched that, and my wife just finished watching that too. It's a ride. My gosh, those characters have no redeeming qualities whatsoever, and yet you can't stop watching.
Exactly.
Yes, Tom is such a slime ball, but I love him. I can't stop watching it.
Right, a very interesting man.
He certainly is. Yeah. Well, I look forward to your Succession podcast then.
One day.
Succession Mouth. It's gonna be great.
Mouth, yep.
Well, guys, hey, thank you for spending some time with us today. Where do people find you on like social media?
Oh boy. So we are Mashmouth Pod on Instagram and Twitter, I believe. We don't typically use Twitter or X, whatever it's called now.
Our Instagram's our main go-to these days.
Okay.
Yep. And then, of course, Mashmouth.
Okay. All right.
Personally, I don't know if Vanessa wants to share her social media because she's not really on social media these days, but I am at Ethan Was Cool on Instagram. You can see all my funny little art that I do. It's all, just stuff that I do in kind of my spare time for Instagram.
Well, we'll put links to the Mashmouth account and Ethan, your account. We'll put links to those in the show notes for this episode. And if you're new to Mashmouth, you can go back and listen to all of their back catalog as they prepare to come out of the law school hiatus. And
Ethan, maybe you can do a comic character about a woman trying to become an attorney.
That would, I mean,
a lot of facts you can draw.
That's a fertile ground. I feel like that's not very tapped in upon, other than like She-Hulk.
Right.
But there's still more to do there.
Well, hey, it's been great talking to you guys. Really, it's a real pleasure.
Yeah, you guys too.
Honk on, keep doing the good work because that's what we're all doing.
Yeah,
here.
Definitely.
It's been great talking to you guys. We had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's so fun.
And we look forward to hearing all of the exciting things from Ethan when he discovers certain characters and certain episodes in the future.
Ominous.
Oh, I have one more question before we go. Have either of you met anybody from the cast ever in person?
No, we have not.
Oh, shoot. Well, that's too bad.
I mean, I guess we have now.
Yes. Oh, my God.
Okay. If you ever, these autograph shows, because I know I do it and Jamie Farr does it and Loretta does it and the three of us do it. The rest of them don't do it, but everybody kind of gets around. So if you ever have an opportunity to go to those and say hello, that would be great. I think you'd really enjoy it.
Yeah,
really.
Definitely.
You're in Jersey, so you're not too far from Alan and Loretta.
Mm-hmm.
As we frequently talk about on the show, a lot of the cast is from New Jersey.
There's always a New Jersey connection there somewhere.
Always. Well, Mashmouth, thank you for spending some time with us today on MASH Matters. It was great.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And until next time, here's looking up your old address.
Okay, that was a rehearsal. Now for the show.